With that, let's transition back to why we are here today. We're glad to be working with G3. Super appreciative of their support at the Magnum partner level, and to be sponsoring this webinar today. So thank you so much to G3 Enterprises. We are talking all about sourcing local, wine bottle trends and technical requirements. And today we have Susan Owen, Senior Director of Sales, as well as Jonathan Mann, Senior Manager of Customer Service and Technical Support, plus John Segali from G3, who's going to be helping to moderate the session. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to them and let them drive things from here. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. And hello, I'm John Segali, and welcome to our webinar on wine glass bottles as we explore the latest bottle trends and share the essential technical requirements for selecting the right bottles for your wine. Make no mistake, the current wine market is hyper-competitive, with many winemakers focusing on new packaging designs and custom embellishments as they target the elusive needs and wants of today's wine consumers. While many people think wine bottles have been around for centuries, the fact is there are a number of new interesting trends which are both literally and figuratively reshaping the wine bottle. Over the next hour, we will hear from two wine industry experts about glass packaging, including the evolution of wine bottle trends, the importance of sustainability in wine packaging, and the technical requirements for selecting wine bottles. Best of all, you can ask questions throughout the webinar. Simply go to the box, click it on, and type in your question. We will try and get to all the questions before the end of the session. So let's get started with some introductions. Joining us today are two recognized authorities on wine packaging: Susan Owen, Senior Director of Sales for G3 Enterprises, and Jonathan Mann, Senior Manager of Customer Service and Technical Support for G3 Enterprises. Susan, who has a passion for wine and travel, leads a team of wine packaging experts across North America. John has 15 years of experience in wine packaging and is responsible for ensuring the highest quality customer experience to G3 clients. These are two talented, experienced individuals that have their fingers on the pulse of the wine industry. So let's get started. Susan, John, what can you tell us about the latest in wine glass bottles?
Hey, John. Hi, everybody. Good morning. It is an honor to be here. And as John mentioned, I love what I get to do. I love the wine industry. I love combining this thing that is culture and food and beverage and really bringing us together. So thank you for having us today. And let's get started. So, before we dive into the trends of today, I always like to take a look at the past and kind of evaluate where we've been and how we got to where we are. So some fun facts that maybe you didn't know. I had fun looking these up and really understanding, right, the history of a glass wine bottle. So really, the first time we found a wine bottle is something that's referred to as the Spire bottle. And not because of somebody's name, but this bottle was found in around 325 to 350 AD in Spire, Germany. As of today, 2024, it is considered the oldest wine bottle in history. So maybe in 10 years, we'll unearth something else. What's really interesting to me, and if you look on the left of the screen, that is the Spire wine bottle. And there is still liquid in there. So the bottom third, I won't call it wine because obviously that just is not possible, but there's still liquid in there. And the way they sealed it was with a heavy amount of wax and a really thick olive oil. So just fun to understand, that is considered the first bottle that really resembled a shape that we're used to today. Fast forward, 1,300 years, and we come across a gentleman, Sir Kenelm Digby, at that time from England. He was an engineer, he was an inventor, he was, a dreamer, and he really introduced this concept of the glass to the wine industry. He helped create a package that was strong enough, robust enough to withhold the pressure of liquid, as well as the actual liquid itself. So Another fun fact is if you like to travel and combine the wine industry like I do, you could go to the London Portrait Gallery, and a picture of Sir Kenelm Digby is actually in the London Portrait Gallery hanging up on the wall. So go say thank you to him for this vessel that we use today to close the vast majority of our wine. Now, so we have the first wine bottle, we have the first kind of, bringing glass into the space. And then if you go forward another couple hundred years to 1820 or so, Ricketts of Bristol, a company out of England, processed and received the first patent for what we'll refer to as the modern glass bottle, right? So what does this mean? It means he took this artisan type of a package and put it into a repeatable form in what we refer to today as the glass wine bottle, right? A standardized shape, similar shoulders, similar neck. But it was this company, Ricketts of Bristol, out of England, that developed this first patent to get us to where we are today. So a little history. Let's moving forward to before trends. What's considered traditional? What do we all think of historically, or what do our consumers historically think of when they consider a wine bottle, right? So we have that 750 ml, screw cap finish. We have the 750 ml cork finish. Historically, we've had the concept of a heavier bottle equate to a better quality wine. We can all debate whether or not we think that's true, but that's been the history. 10 capsules have been, part of the wine package concept of what's traditional. COVID we'll discuss, but historically we've had this idea of every single wine needs its own bottle shape, it needs its own dimensions, it needs to be tapered, every variety, every brand. And then also we've all been to the restaurant where the somm or the maitre d' comes out and pours the wine, and there's the deep punt, at the bottom, and somehow that's equated to, right, a deep punt means good quality or represents something to the consumer's mind. So if that's traditional, what am I seeing, right? So I have a really cool purview of the industry that I get to work with so many customers across the space. And what we're seeing right now is really the advent of the smaller 375 ml bottle taking off. We have consumers who are choosing maybe to have smaller packages for whatever the reasons. We're seeing 750s and crown cap, right? So I thought that was interesting. Maybe a way to link a consumer who's more accustomed to opening a beer bottle. We are seeing sparkling. I think everybody knows this trend right now, sparkling wine, spritzers, super light, super effervescent, getting a younger demographic possibly to be interested in wine. Lightweighting of glass, of which we'll talk about, right? But that's definitely a trend, and a trend that I think is here to stay. And then last but certainly not least is this concept of the alternative material, right? So not necessarily stealing from the glass space, but looking at a way to bring new consumers in, to find new outlets for revenue that maybe we as an industry traditionally or historically haven't been able to touch. Okay, so, we have this evolution of history, 300 AD, 1800s, to where we are today. And I guess the question is, what does it all mean, Alfie? What's the point, right? We have trends, we have evolution, and the question has to be, does the consumer care? So, when I think through why are we doing what we're doing, there's a few things to consider. Is a packaging trend going to be the sole reason that a consumer picks up a bottle? Well, according to Wine Business Monthly, they would say there's other things that consumers will choose to focus on first outside of packaging weight, right? Things like taste. If it's not going to taste good, we're probably not going to just pick it up because the package is light or looks pretty. Recommendations from friends, price point, brands, sustainability, right? There's all these things that potentially have a higher impact to the consumer than packaging weight. That being said, on the flip side, Nicholas Quill, Master of Wine, he said in a recent article that for him and the Crimson Wine Group, lightweight glass has really been beneficial. It's opened up new revenue streams for them. It's allowed them on cruise lines. It's allowed them on airlines. So some interesting perspectives of maybe there's things that the consumer cares about more potentially than packaging weight, but on the flip side, right, there's a reason to consider it and think about it. And certainly last but not least, I can say all these things that I'm seeing as a trend, but it comes down to how are you telling your story? Why are you choosing what you are choosing? You know, what is the point behind you offering a lighter weight EcoFlint glass bottle without a capsule? What is your goal? And I encourage every wine owner, winemaker really to think through what does their brand represent and tell your story. Okay, I look forward to the day when I don't think I have to say COVID anymore, but I think we are still in a point where we're still coming out of it, and we should consider, you know, what did we learn out of this, you know, for me, once in a lifetime, I hope, fingers crossed, phenomena, event, pandemic. But what we learned from a packaging standpoint is really this concept of less is more, right? So we saw this idea of consolidation of suppliers to mitigate risk. We saw consolidation of bottle molds. If I said, you know, traditionally you had a mold for every varietal, every brand, every tier, etc., you know, we saw that shrink to help make the supply chain cycle easier for wineries and, quite frankly, just accessible because it was so painful. We're also seeing, you know, a consolidation of custom fiber along that same idea of every wine having a different glass bottle. I would say we saw, right, wineries choosing to say, do I really need custom fiber for every mold? Is it okay to do one standardized fiber across the board in terms of artwork, right? Maybe I have my brand, but I don't need to call out, you know, a red blend, or I don't need to call out, hey, this is a Paso Cab from this specific vineyard. Maybe widen the scope to make things a little easier to manage. So to that vein, right, it always came down to supply chain simplification. How can you take something so complex, so big, and shrink it down and make it so it fits into your business operations? So for us, you know, really what that means is, how can you look at domestic support, right? Domestic manufacturing, domestic repack. It's much easier to control what's here stateside than what potentially is happening across an ocean or across a country border. Okay, so something I am really passionate about, both personally and professionally, is this idea of sustainability and how it relates to wine packaging. So, you know, I think we'd all be living under rocks at this point if we didn't, you know, at least hear about this idea of how do we make a more sustainable product? How do we tell our story to the consumer? And how do we, in general, be better stewards of the environment and really give ourselves the ability to plan for the future? So most recently, we have the Sustainable Wine Roundtable Bottle Weight Accord. And, you know, you might say, well, what is this? What does it mean? Essentially, the goal of this bottle weight accord is to reduce the average, that's key, reduce the average bottle weight to 420 grams by the end of 2026, right? So the idea that your 2025 harvest would be bottled and the average weight across your entire glass portfolio would be under 420 grams. And really that represents, you know, about a 25% reduction. What I find particularly interesting is this isn't just being driven by wineries. This isn't just being driven by governmental organizations. This is really an industry-wide approach to tackling this concept of sustainability. You have members like Whole Foods, a retailer. You have an online winery like Naked Wines. You have the LCBO out of Canada making statements, right? So you have different parts of the wine process really driving this change. Whole Foods, as an example, is encouraging, you know, their suppliers, their wine industry suppliers, to also lightweight so they can tell their story to their consumers, to their shoppers. So really interesting. You know, for me, again, it's thinking through, it's not saying every wine bottle has to be below 420, but how can you look to improve the average of your entire portfolio? Next, right, when you talk about sustainability, that means evaluating your package. And so I think we are in the middle of this. For me, some people might say, Susan, this isn't a fun debate, but for me, it's a fun debate. This concept of to capsule or not to capsule, right? So some facts are just simply true. All 10 capsules today are made overseas. There's no domestic manufacturing. Obviously, there's implications to carbon footprint, but they're classic. They look beautiful. So that's one type of capsule. Still wine polys, yes, can be made domestically here stateside in the United States. However, right, the caveat to that is because of the way the still wine poly capsule is made, it's not 100% recyclable. The other side of that, you have 10, you have still wine poly. really, right, the concept of the no capsule is the most sustainable option. John, can we go back on the slide? Somehow we moved forward. There we go. So really, right, this idea of the no capsule, it is the best for the environment, but there are some challenges there. You really need an educated consumer, right? Historically, the concept of a capsule is a signal to the consumer that they have a complete package aesthetically, right? It looks nice. But you have to have a consumer that's educated to know that the capsule is really more for aesthetics as opposed to function. So it's a great option. I'll give a little plug and shout out to my friends at Honig Winery. They recently launched a new marketing campaign called Going Topless. So they have chosen as a company in Napa Valley to remove all capsules from their packaging as a way to impact their carbon footprint. So just something fun that a real world winery is adopting and how they're choosing to tell their story to their consumers. Okay, so continuing down this idea of sustainability. So when we think about a glass bottle, right, we have to think about the manufacturing process. And really, it's about looking at those eco-friendly materials for wine bottles. And one of the biggest challenges today in the glass manufacturing process is how do we get more recycled glass, called cullet, into the recycling stream, right? So we can say that glass is infinite recyclable, it has a high recycled content, but where we have to continue to drive and improve is within that recovery of recycled glass. So super exciting. Halo Glass Recycling is a new plant out of Modesto, California, with a goal of processing about 150,000 tons of recycled glass into cullet, which would directly go into the glass manufacturing stream. So I encourage everyone to maybe check with their local municipalities about how they can recycle glass, whether from your tasting room, from at home. I know some regions are a little more challenging than others. I happen to be at the Paso Robles Wine Alliance meeting with the Wine Institute talking about the next topic, which is the bottle bill, right? So the bottle bill, as you all know, you're far more experts on this than I, but it started January 1st. And it is the concept of glass wine bottles are now a part of the California Redemption Value Program. And anything 750 ml or above is a 10-cent CRV, and anything smaller, 375, is a 5-cent CRV. So reach out, local municipalities, reach out to CalRecycle and understand how you can work to get more glass into the recycling stream. And you might go, well, why? Well, recycled glass, AKA cullet, can be transformed into all bottle types with one exception, clear flint, right? Clear flint is called clear flint because it essentially is free from color. So when you think through your options, antique green, champagne green, they can all have content of recycled glass. So if you're looking at, hey, what's something I might be able to do to better improve my story, my carbon footprint, I would suggest potentially EcoFlint, right? EcoFlint, instead of clear flint, has a little more recycled content. If you look at it, and you might not be able to see, but it actually you can. It has more of like a bluish green hue because it has more recycled glass, whereas clear, as the name indicates, is completely clear. EcoFlint is an excellent option for all white wine, especially like that Sauv Blanc. It is not, and I repeat, it's not suitable for rosé, right? When you think of the rosé color, there's a color interaction that happens between that bluish green tinge and the rosé, and you get this browning effect. But for all other white wine, it's a really interesting concept to consider, and it has more recycled content by percentage. So again, I'd say check with your supplier and see what options are available. Maybe that coupled with how could I potentially lightweight my package, right? Consider this idea of what's my story around capsules. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime, John Mann. John and I work very closely together across all aspects of glass, from the technical side as well as the customer support. So thank you, everybody. John, it's all yours.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, Susan, and thanks, John, and thanks everyone on the call today. Good morning. So these next few slides are really just more kind of things to consider when you're thinking about sourcing really anything, but I know bottles in particular, what we're talking about today, but we'll also dive into a little bit of the component side. So in this slide, you see a few bullet points, and we touched on a little bit through Susan's notes and comments about we source local, right? I think some things to be considerate of is just the important aspects of finding the right partner. Here in California, we have a lot of options. And so, that's a great piece of making sure that we can say we're sourcing local and domestically. But when we look at that partner, what options and services do they offer with that? And so we think repack and warehousing come to mind, and the logistics elements of that. So we can be very efficient in our supply chain and operations, and ultimately, right, continue to kind of cut down on our carbon footprint aspects of kind of the supply chain. But there's another piece about also the component manufacturing. And as G3, we'll get into that a little bit later, just providing multiple services to kind of meet your needs. And so just some things to kind of keep in mind on a high level. So we'll talk now about kind of the component level piece. So specifically on the bottle, some of the things that we touched on already, you'll see here on the slide is, right, let's talk about shape, color, and finish. So a lot of this is when you think about maybe if, you guys aren't new to this, but a lot of it maybe is change management driven, whether it's you looking to change just to revitalize your package, or it's a customer driven change on your end, regulatory changes, or a procurement change. This is where I think a lot of value can come in from your partner, is understanding kind of those change impacts and what that means for you, your bottling line, and ultimately your customer. So shape, color, finish, those things are important. Whether you're maintaining traditional elements, want to be in Burgundy or Bordeaux style bottles, as Susan just mentioned, in terms of eco flint and clear flint differences, understanding kind of that end look, what's important to you. Height and weight, we've talked a lot about that, especially on the weight side. So generally kind of follows suit. If you lightweight glass, you're probably going to take you got to take some glass out of it. So sometimes you see some height reduction. So understanding that impact overall. And component fit. You can do all the work to find the perfect bottle, but now you got to find how to seal it properly. And so we'll get into that in a few slides later. But overall, the package look is important. But I think a lot of it where we see an opportunity is guiding you through some of those change aspects as you kind of, either launch a new package, new brand, or you're changing something that, if it's been in its current form for a while, but you want to make the right decisions going forward. Okay, so we'll start with still wine cork and kind of understanding the impact when now you've chosen your bottle, and now it's understanding, all right, great, I'm going to seal it. What are some of the things to consider there? So with still wine, as you see in the graphic there, these are some of the important elements when it comes to the glass bottle. So you have kind of just, your standard kind of glass bottle here. You're looking at now, probably the most important thing is for cork length. So fill height is an important aspect in that bottle design. And so if your fill height changes, especially if you're changing components and you want to maintain existing cork, you got to make sure that there's compatibility there. If reducing that fill height enough happens, you're starting to reduce that headspace, that ullage. And that could lead to some issues potentially out in distribution or in your warehousing if temperatures aren't controlled. And so you see some of that change in that headspace. So things like leaking, wicking, and even push corks can occur. So making sure you have the right component, and in particular, cork length is critical. But more often than not, you have two standards that really control these things pretty well. GPI kind of domestically, and then you have SETI standards that can control or controlling these elements. If you are looking at sourcing a bottle that maybe it's unclear if they are compliant to a GPI or SETI, and that's where your partner can come in to make sure that the bottle design that you're looking at is going to be compatible with those components. And so we can go into a lot of the application aspects, bore profiles as well. And that's where that really in-depth conversations with your supply partners will come in handy to make sure that, again, you're set up for success. So similarly on sparkling cork, differences here, traditionally you have kind of two sizes. You have a 26 millimeter size, a 29 millimeter size. And so depending on the style that you're going for, those two size bottles are going to really determine the diameter now of the champagne cork, traditionally speaking. And so you'll see a generally larger diameter if you're going for a 29 millimeter finish bottle, and a smaller diameter cork if you're going for a 26. Key thing here is that we've seen is now you got to control those elements when you're inserting that cork into the bottle and applying that wire hood. Extraction forces, obviously, you don't want a consumer that has to struggle really hard, or it's too easy and then maybe that cork ejects too fast. And so controlling the insertion depth is key. And that's a combination of making sure your corker setups, your wire hood machine setups are dialed in. So in bottle, after that wire hood's applied, you're kind of hitting that target of 24 millimeters insertion depth. Okay, so we talked about cork. Now we'll talk about screw cap. So more commonly, I mean, we always generally see 30 by 60s. There's other cap, styles out there. And the one I have in my hand here would be considered what we call a roll-on. Those are probably familiar with the Tork-on, which are kind of the Stelton Lux or whack caps you see out there. But more predominantly, you'll see is it's roll-on. And so the pictures that you see in the slide here, on the left is the capper head, and then on the right is kind of what that cap should look like once applied. So what I want to gear toward is maybe those who have not moved into a screw cap package yet and have only been in cork, but maybe you're thinking about it. So that's a big change, So what are some of the impacts when you make that move? You have different OTR rates and liners that are available to you. There's different aesthetic considerations and design aspects that can come into play, and it can impact your package. The bottle design itself, right? So you go from a cork finish to this screw cap finish, and again, controlled either by GPI or SETI standards. Those are things that we can, obviously, and any partner can help you go through those type of changes, and again, help from a machine setup standpoint, line setup, to make sure again that the package integrity is there, and ultimately your end customers and consumers are happy and having a good time opening these bottles. Okay, so there's a lot of things to consider, and I think the most important thing is you go to the point of choosing the right bottle that meets your needs, and now you still got to find that closure. And so again, it's a lot of options out there and lots of information, both what's important to you, your customers, and then the options that your partners that can supply these components have. And so it's really, making sure that everyone's aligned. You're talking through what's important and really understanding some of these nuanced details, again, so that you're set up for success and ultimately your customers are having a good time opening these bottles. And so, at being G3, we pride ourselves of we call the G3 difference. We have our end-to-end capabilities. We can do a lot. In addition to the bottle side of things, component manufacturing, logistics, you name it. We have a lot of collaborative partnerships, and obviously partnering with our end customers as well is important. And with just the business we have a lot of experts here. And so a lot of it really is at our customers' disposal. And so if there is something very unique and a topic that comes up, we likely have someone who can talk to about that. And again, we think we have a way to maximize efficiencies in your supply chain and operations. And so again, that's an important aspect we like to make sure that's known. And again, technical services, which is where I cover, and my team, I'm proud of my team and the experience that we have, and hopefully really the customer service that we provide. And ultimately, it's whatever aspect of service, or if not, we're not a partner yet, we can be an asset to utilize to help you just to be successful. So thank you again and appreciate it. I'm going to hand this back over to Susan to finish up.
Okay, well, thank you, John. I can speak from experience with John's team. It's one thing, to have a portfolio or a catalog of products, but what stands out most to me and how our customers are best served is what John said, and that's his technical services team. So, within our G3 space, we do have glass wine bottles that are in stock and ready to ship. We have that full range, as I talked about, if you're looking to lightweight, or if your brand story is to stay with an ultra premium bottle that represents tradition and quality. But we have the range, and John's team really comes in and says, okay, depending upon what you're choosing to use, how do we maximize that efficiency on the line? So if you're looking for something under 420 grams, we have 6 domestic molds that we can offer, the standard 5 colors that are available, and then the 3 bottle shapes. But again, this is about, say you choose a lightweight glass bottle and you need to run that on your line or your mobile line or your co-packer. We want to be a partner, and we want to be here to support your business needs. What makes me really proud is all of our glass is made in the United States domestically. We do have fast lead times. So if you're in a pinch, right, if it's something we have packed out in an inventory, of which we have a lot, we could get you a full truckload or a less than full truckload order, within a relatively quick sphere. I'd say within 5 business days if it's something packed out. So I encourage you to visit our website, and I'm always an open door policy should you have any questions. But thank you very much, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Well, thank you, Susan and John. That was terrific. And now we're going to go to the questions and answer session. We've already got some questions that have rolled in. And if you have a question, again, just click on the box and type in the question, and we'll try and get to all of them. First question, Susan, is the lightweight bottle considered a trend, or do you think it's actually here to stay?
So it's here to stay, right? I mean, yes, there will be fluctuations and peaks and valleys with any trend. But, you know, we as a society, we have a fiduciary responsibility to be good to the environment. And again, the point of this concept of lightweighting, it's an iterative process. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't mean you go from a 800-gram bottle down to 420. You engage someone like John Mann and his team and go, okay, if I'm currently in an 800-gram bottle, you know, what are the steps that I need to do? What are the things that I need to consider to get there? But you know, the long and the short of it, it's staying. It's something here that we're being asked to do by the consumer, and the consumer ultimately is who matters when we're deciding how we want to tell our story.
All right. I own a small winery. We're making premium wines. And can you tell me, do you have any research that indicates lightweight bottles are acceptable among consumers of premium or ultra premium wines?
If that question's to me, John, so I would say that requires a much deeper conversation, and I would love whoever, you know, asked that question to discuss that more in depth. Yes, there's tons of research out there, but it really is dependent upon your brand story. And as I mentioned, it's really fun that I get to work with a wide array of customers, everything from a super premium making 1,000 cases, you know, up to a larger space of 100,000 cases. So whoever asked, please reach out, and I would love to discuss that more and see if we can find a solution for you.
Okay. John, I have a small winery, and what is the process that we'll go through if I was to switch my supplier to G3?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, just depends on kind of what support you're looking at and what you need. I think we just want to understand kind of what changes we're talking about, as I alluded to before. I think that's key. Once we understand scope and change and kind of the needs of the customer, you know, generally we'll just start with kind of a call, and then if we do believe that, you know, an on-site visit's necessary and required, absolutely happy to make that happen. And so. But yeah, we'll start with just let's talk on the phone and just kind of see what's needed. And yeah, we're happy to support.
All right. Susan, you mentioned the wine bottle accord in your presentation and its goal to reduce the average bottle weight. I think you said 200 to 420 grams by 2026. If that happens, when 2026 arrives, are they going to push the goalpost farther down the field again and call for even lighter weight bottles?
So a good question, John, right? I am not on the Sustainable Wine Roundtable. I can speak to what they're asking now, which is to make an effort, right? To try and find a solution. So short of the crystal magic 8-ball effect, I can't speak to what they're doing, but I envision we'll have some guidelines that come out from the Sustainable Wine Roundtable. But again, the message is for the people who have signed on to attempt to reduce their average weight by about 25%. And we'll see what the future holds.
All right, and here's kind of a follow-up question, either for Susan or John. If wine bottles are made mostly of recycled glass, why is there pressure to switch to lighter bottles, cans, or boxes?
John, you want to take it, or you want me to?
Well, I can chime in. I think
for it.
just again is when we're looking at just the expectations, whether it's customer driven or kind of regulatory, I think there's always a need, right? Glass bottles are just generally heavier compared to other packages, but you know, it's going to be a slower process in terms of those changes. But you know, other formats have their purposes and places. But you know, it's all going to depend on change, right? But there's always going to be a need for more sustainable options, and so that trend will continue.
Okay.
And I'll piggyback on that. So look, glass will remain the main package material of choice, right? 90%-ish, more or less, of the wine volume today is in glass. It's a fantastic option. So when we talk about this idea of alternative packaging, it really is about how do we use that to reach a new demographic or a new consumer and find incremental spaces to take more shelf space, right? How do we get more room in the retail environment to draw consumers into wine?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Susan, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, glass is still the viable packaging for wine.
Resoundingly, yes.
Okay, all right. Susan, what sets the G3 bottles apart from the competition?
So for G3 and for me, I think what really makes us different and unique and is how we look at the process, right? So we want to be here for our customers to succeed. And how I define success is helping our customers sell more wine. So whether that's the technical support, whether that's our localized expertise, we have domestic manufacturing so we can reduce the risk, the supply chain standpoint. But I consider I've done my job when a customer tells me I was able to get a package to the retail outlet, to the on-premise, to the off-premise in a timely manner, on time, in full, and in a fashion that helps draw the consumer in. So if I can do that with a domestically made bottle and the technical and the customer support local within California, then I feel like we've done our job. And that's what makes G3 unique, is we're looking at it from an end-to-end integrated solution.
All righty. John, if I am switching over to a lightweight bottle, what does that do to my bottling line?
Well, it depends. I mean, one of the most important things is when you're switching over lightweight, again, the glass has to go somewhere. And if you're taking that weight out, if you're not changing some height aspects, you're probably changing distribution and how that glass, those walls are going to be formed. So line speeds are critical. As you have change kind of points between those lines, looking at the control speeds of those change points and making sure that we're not seeing a lot of bottle impact issues and things of that nature. But generally, lightweighting, you're not changing a lot of or you're really not changing any of the aspects when it comes to the interaction pieces with like either cork or screw cap. It's really going to be mostly handling kind of impacts that we want to understand and make sure that your line is set up, or if you're co-packing, understanding your co-packer has the ability to understand and make changes as needed with those lightweighting efforts.
Okay. And here's a follow-up question for you, John. G3 Enterprises is based in Modesto. We're here on the Central Coast. Where and how do I get assistance when I need it?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we have a network of our sales team that you can contact. We have an account management team as well as kind of, they're partners with our sales managers. And so generally, right, you initially call them, but our tech services team, right, we span and we can reach you guys very, very quickly. It's not too far away. It all depends on kind of the situation and seeing what's needed. But generally, yeah, I mean, again, we'll probably want to just ideally understand the issues that might be happening, get on the phone and understand kind of what we're maybe experiencing. And sometimes, we can work through these issues fairly quickly if they come up over the phone. But yeah, it's really all kind of situation dependent. But again, we pride ourselves. Yes, we're located in Modesto, but we service where our customers are at, and so you should be able to expect very, very prompt service.
Okay. And Susan, again, we're of limited size with no research or development capabilities. How can we stay up on the latest trends in the industry?
I said, let's partner, right? So I'm very grateful, thankful that I have a wonderful team of sales managers across the United States, specifically one in Paso, many in the North Coast. So what I encourage is let's have a conversation and understand, what your brand represents, who you're targeting. So it all starts, and I think John's mentioned this, with understanding your needs. And so if we have that conversation, we can utilize our tools and our resources to discuss what will be a right fit for you and your brand and your position. John, to that end, we had a question come through before the webinar even started in one of the registrations, and I'd like to address it if that's okay. So the question was, or statement followed by the question is, I'm curious about the future of wine packaging trends in relation to the next generation of wine drinkers. Do they care about screw cap versus cork, bottle versus bag/can, insert whichever alternative package? So, I think it's a great question, right? And what I would say is it really is up to you as the winery owner and the winemaker to determine who your target audience is and who you are targeting, right? If I'm a, $75 bottle of single vineyard Paso Cab, my consumer is going to be very different than someone who is trying to create their label around reaching maybe, a 22 to a 30-year-old who has a different set of goals and buying habits and decision making. So there is room for everything in the industry. There's room for cork, there's room for screw cap, and there's room for different packaging depending upon your brand needs. And so my advice is really to dig deep and figure out what your brand represents. And when somebody hears your brand, whether it's a consumer or even an employee, you have a unified message. And if that unified message is a heavier weight bottle because it recognizes and represents your brand, then that's your story. If it's something that I want to do a crown cap and a 375 lightly spritzed as a, sit on my back patio at 5 o'clock on a Saturday with a bunch of friends eating fried chicken, that's your brand also. So I would say figure out your story and then figure out a way to tell it. And I would love to partner on that journey to help, really make sure you're succeeding.
Terrific. Well, that concludes our questions. If you do have questions following this, you've got the addresses for both Susan and John there on the screen. If you want to learn more about G3 Enterprises or place an order, simply visit g3enterprises.com. And with that, I'll turn it back over.
Thanks so much, John, Jonathan, and Susan. Well, we're so grateful for you joining and for your ongoing support of the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance. Thanks for sharing this valuable information with our members. Just a reminder, we will be sharing the slides and recording. I'll send a follow-up email after this, either later today or tomorrow, with links to those. I also am going to put a link in the chat to a feedback survey. Like I said, we heavily rely on the feedback of our members to help guide the educational programming that we provide. So please take a minute. It's a short survey, just a couple of ratings, and then an option for you to provide any additional feedback if you'd like to. We would really appreciate your input. And so with that, I'll just say thank you again, Susan, Jonathan, and John, and have a great day, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Carol, and thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.